through, we've all talked about, we said the same thing over and over again. The cops found it disgusting. Everything is like, but there was this myth going around of a disagreement, I guess, so that the media could cling to the narrative that America is full of racist rubes, which is something that makes maybe their viewers feel superior. But this wasn't a divisive case. And I think it's a contrast between the reality of Americans who are experiencing this all at once and the manufactured environment of the people who create the news, which is that this reflects a racist country. It reflects racial division. It means the cops are all racist. It means it's not a bug in the system. It's a system itself. That was what was creating the perception of division. Everybody agreed this case was disgusting and ugly and there should be justice. But there was another story being played a lot. And now I'm going to just get really selfish. I'm glad that he was found guilty on all charges. Yeah. Even if he might not be guilty of all charges. Oh, my God. I am glad that he is guilty of all charges because I want a verdict that keeps this country from going up in flames.
Oh, my goodness.
No.
What do you mean?
Look, Greg, listen.
What do you mean? No, I'm at least being honest. My neighborhood was looted. Greg, I don't ever want to go through that again.
We do not sacrifice individuals for the sake
I'm
of
saying he's
how
guilty.
people
I'm
feel.
saying I'm glad about the verdict.
Okay, but the bottom line is
you can't disagree with
that courtroom is a place where the evidence is brought in. It is pristine in terms of the way it's handled. Everything outside of the courtroom does not enter it.
Okay. Whoa. Did you wait a second? Did you hear what Mike Tobin said when he was interviewing some people when they said, hey, we're not going to loot tonight, we're going to celebrate?
Right,
so we were dealing with what we thought was a sense of extortion, that if this didn't go a certain way, I'm speaking the truth. If it didn't go a certain way, there was going to be destruction. We know that. Why pretend otherwise?
All right.
Come on.
When you make Judge Jeanine sound reasonable, Judge Jeanine, you might have just gone a bit too far. This is Fox host Greg Gutfeld managing somehow to get an entire panel of his peers to groan when he discovers the line and then blows past it on live television. Here Gutfeld actually suggests that Derek Chauvin may not be guilty of all charges, but that he's still glad that he was found guilty because it means there will be less chance of violence, and even his own colleagues make their disgust known. So let's just take this one point at a time. First of all, Gutfeld suggests that Chauvin may not be guilty of all charges, but here's the thing. He was. The jury found him guilty on all 3 charges, and beyond the criminal justice system adjudicating this issue, we all saw what happened with our own eyes. I don't think I need to relitigate the death of George Floyd because I doubt there's anyone watching who thinks that Derek Chauvin was justified in kneeling on the neck of another man for nearly 10 minutes until the life left his body. So the fact that Greg Gutfeld is suggesting that Chauvin somehow wasn't guilty is either evidence of his racism, that somehow a white police officer is justified in acting as judge, jury, and executioner against this black man, or it's evidence of his contrarianism, the fact that he just promotes the opposite views of whatever the left says just for the sake of opposing them. But either way, all he's doing is making a fool out of himself. But then he says that he's glad that he was convicted, even if he wasn't actually guilty, because it keeps the country from going up in flames. And so if there was any doubt about Gutfeld's integrity here, there's not, but just humor me for a second, that goes out the window the second he suggests that someone who he believes may be innocent being declared guilty is a good thing. Gutfeld is so generously willing to sacrifice someone's life and freedom because, hey, there won't be any related violence and that's convenient for him. Another gem from the Law and Order party on this Law and Order news network. And finally, the issue of violence that would have come as the result of a not guilty verdict. Does Greg Gutfeld know why protests would have likely followed a not guilty verdict? It's because Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd. That's why. And so when the pattern of white police officers getting off scot-free after killing black people continues, then guess what? There will be protests because that's not justice. And again, I say this knowing full well the facts of the case. We all saw it. Officers from around the country gave testimony backing up the fact that Chauvin's actions weren't proper. You don't have to be a high-paid lawyer to be able to acknowledge the objective reality that Derek Chauvin acted improperly and murdered George Floyd. And so yeah, if he didn't face accountability, there would have been protests and they would have been justified. That is why people protest. Derek Chauvin's guilty verdict wasn't extortion, it was accountability. No one was strong-armed into convicting him. The reason that Derek Chauvin is and will stay behind bars wasn't because of the threat of looting, it wasn't because of Biden's comments, it wasn't because of anything but his own actions. If Chauvin wanted to be free, he wouldn't have knelt on the neck of another man until he died. And the last people who should have any trouble understanding that are those who come from the self-described party of personal responsibility. And by the way, Gutfeld isn't the only high-profile conservative making this ridiculous argument. Ben Shapiro decided to flex his intellectual prowess by tweeting in response to Don Lemon saying justice has been served, quote, "And we all know he would never have said this had the reverse verdict been reached." I mean, yeah, it's almost like a murderer being convicted of murder is different from a murderer not being convicted of murder. Why would people think justice had been served if justice hadn't been served? The truth is that this shouldn't even be partisan, but because these Fox hosts are so fully entrenched in their brazen racism and xenophobia, well then suddenly an open and shut case where one guy killed another guy is somehow not open and shut because God forbid Greg Gutfeld simply applaud the fact that justice was served. Think about it. All he had to do was say Chauvin was clearly guilty, he was found guilty, the right verdict was reached. Period. But instead, Gutfeld went on national television and floated the idea that in fact, he may very well have been innocent, but hey, I'm willing to sacrifice the guy because I don't want to personally endure any of the inconvenience that would come from a protest following an unjust ruling. It is one disgusting statement wrapped inside of another disgusting statement, all in service of Fox's overarching agenda. And in case you forget, which Fox News makes damn sure you won't, that agenda is to constantly remind you that black people equate to violence. Not to mention anything about why there's violence, not to mention anything about the spate of shootings of black people at the hands of white police officers. No, that's apparently of little importance. As far as Fox is concerned, the story starts and ends with black people taking to the streets, and that's the only part they're willing to talk about. Convenient, huh? So Greg Gutfeld and the rest of Fox News will continue to push this narrative, even if some of their hosts clearly don't like it when he's just a little too overt. But rest assured, what he's saying is the result of exactly what the network's aim is. Gutfeld is the embodiment of exactly that Fox News indoctrination of refocusing every ounce of attention onto protests and violence and looting and black people, with zero focus whatsoever on the root of any of these problems. Their agenda is as clear as day, and it's so depraved that even Fox's own host can't help but express disgust when they're forced to hear it out loud. To see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe. And for a deeper dive, check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I discuss the week's top stories and interview major players in the world of politics, like Vice President Kamala Harris, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Chuck Schumer, Katie Porter, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.